You are listening to the Let's Talk Marketing podcast hosted by me, Katya Allison. So, what have you gotten yourself into? A great question. In short, it's a good time, great conversation, and a little bit of learning along the way. Through insightful interviews with top marketers, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders, I get to explore the latest trends, techniques, and strategies in the world of marketing for you. I am here to offer you engaging and informative discussions to help you stay up to date on the latest trends and take your marketing skills to the next level. In today's episode, we're covering leveraging video for marketing with Jon Mowat. He is a true expert in the world of content marketing and video with over 2 decades of experience. He has written 2 fantastic books on video marketing and is the managing director of the renowned video marketing agency, Hurricane. He's crafted successful video campaigns for big names like Sanofi and Bupa, the World Bank, and the Salvation Army, just to name a few. Get ready for some incredible insights from this multi-award winning mastermind, including his latest work with the World Food Program. So let's get started. Let's talk marketing with Jon. Jon, welcome to Let's Talk Marketing. I'm excited to have you on here. We decided to start hitting record so that we didn't go for 2 hours and record a whole other podcast. But thank you so much for coming on.
It's nice to be here. Lovely to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah. We're going to be chatting about how you can leverage video for marketing strategies. But before we dive into that, I want to get to know you a little bit better. I want our listeners to get to know you a little bit better. So some basic questions for you. Would love to hear what your first marketing role was, or what you would define as like a marketing role, what your current role is.
Cool. My background was at the BBC, where I was a program maker. So it's like my first role was kind of very much on the other side. It wasn't brand side. It was like content side, making documentaries and stuff like that. And then I left the BBC the same year that YouTube started. And I don't really think I noticed the first marketing thing that I did. But I think right back in 2006, started making YouTube films and then some for brands. And then really, it was only about 5 or 6 years later that it was like, oh, I work in marketing. Do you know what I mean? It was like video went from just production to like video marketing, which was about suddenly much more measurable things. So that's how I sort of came into it. So now I run a video marketing agency, or a social first video agency. And we do, lots of proper marketing stuff now. And so, I'm the MD there, and I work as a consultant with brands. So I spend a lot of time talking to marketing directors, marketing managers, like, okay, what are you trying to do? And then how do we use video to do that? It's normally grow awareness, drive conversions, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So very much into it now.
I think there's so much storytelling in everything that you do. What do you love about what you do? But on the other side, what would you pluck out? And by pluck out, I mean, I love my job. If I could just remove this, it would be perfection. But I like to remain positive. So tell me what you love about what you do first, and then I think, what would you pluck out?
I'm a people person, right? I love people. And I think the best thing about what I do is I meet loads of different people, and I go and we have a deep conversation around what are the struggles that you have, what sort of challenges do you face, but at a really high level. So you deep dive into people's businesses very quickly, and especially in video and brand video. If you're trying to make a brand video that's 30 seconds long, 60 seconds long, you have to condense everything down into this really sort of nugget of information, like what you stand for. So I really love that. I really love emotionally engaging with people. So it's all about making that emotional connection with people, whether that's in a strong documentary or just a 30-second app. So I love meeting people, finding out what the problems they face are, solving those with emotion. I think, what could I do without? I mean, for me, it's just the sheer amount of stuff going on in life. If I could just hone that down. I think I'm very enthusiastic about it all as well. So I lean into things a lot. So I think the ability to step away a little bit would be nice. But I have to say, there's nothing in my job that I would get rid of, because I've got an amazing team. I've got 20 people. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think there's 20, probably less screen time. My eyes are knackered because I'm looking at too many screens. So if we could go back a couple of years and I have more in-person meetings, I think my life would be perfect. But 10 hours a day on the screen is not good for anybody, right?
Yeah. So more in person, and also like actual I'm putting out my hands like that's the sign
Mm.
language for book, but like
Yeah.
being able to be informed and stay up to date with something that's not on a screen is so
Mm.
nice. Like I find that
Yeah.
being able to like sit out somewhere and
Mm.
read something or just listen to something maybe um so that you're not always in front of like a screen and wearing,
I think what's really happening now
that
is conferences are back in a big way. So I do a lot of conferences. That isn't a brag. I'm just like, do you know what I mean? I was in Denmark last week. I'm in Cyprus in a few weeks, and it's like actually being in front of people, learning, not looking at a screen it's so refreshing. And I think that's
yes.
the really nice thing that is back. So people can learn without doing a YouTube tutorial or whatever. So it's yeah, that's fun
That's
too.
true.
Bit of travel.
That's true. That's very true. Now, this is ironic that we're talking so much about being away from your screen because my next question is what in like the world of I think that we live in right now, social networks, people gravitate towards social networks for so many different things, for inspiration, entertainment, and just kind of education. So I'm wondering what social networks, if any, do you go to for either inspiration, entertainment, or education?
The social channels I'm using at the moment, I'm using I don't know if it's in the States yet, but it is certainly in the UK. I think it's in the States, called We Are Eight. It's a really exciting, socially conscious driven platform. It doesn't have an algorithm. It's still got creators and content makers and all those sort of things, but it is advertising funded. But the good thing is that you choose to watch an advert, and every time you do it, you get 6 cents or 8 cents or 6p. So you actually get paid for watching ads, and some of the money goes to
Oh, nice.
charity. So I'm like, I love that platform. It's really challenging the kind of the monopoly of Facebook and Meta and that kind of Google monster by putting forward a different model of social. So I'm on that one, and then for work, I'm afraid I'm on all of them. I mean, TikTok,
Yeah.
Insta, I have to consume them, but the one that I actually spend the most time on is YouTube, because I find the landscape format where you're deep diving into entertainment. Like I get distracted by shorts. I'm trying not to be, but that long form, the long form documentary stuff, 6, 7, 8 minutes I think that's what I enjoy.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And we will dive into like what you can do in a YouTube short versus what you can do
Mm,
in like the 6 to 7 minutes and how you can hone that
yeah.
in as a marketer. Now, outside of social networks, where do you go or how do you stay up to date on the trends that are going on outside of social
Um,
networks? Is there a newsletter, a
yeah.
podcast?
I'm really. No, I don't. I mean, I'm really lucky because I'm at conferences quite regularly. I just sit in at other conferences. So I was at a publishing conference last week, and I found out some amazing stuff about publisher networks. I go to general marketing ones. So I think for me, normally that's where what I tend to do is go to a conference, find out about a
Okay.
new trend, and then I'll just Google it and just have a little read around it. But I'm not a massive, I do consume podcasts when I find a topic, but I'll tend to come at it from the topic
Yeah.
angle rather than, than a regular listen. But
Yeah.
I'd love to do more podcasts because you're off screens a bit. So that would
You
be
are off
a good
screens a
thing.
bit, except
Yeah.
for when they're audio video, which
When the
this one will be.
video as
This
well,
one is
yeah.
exactly. Well, I feel like everybody consumes things in such different ways. You have to be able to
Yes,
give people options for how they want to consume it. Some people want to read the whole
absolutely.
transcript. Why you would want to, I have no idea, but like maybe
Yeah.
they're highlighter people. Some people want to be able to see like the nuances in like the
Mhm.
expressions of someone's face, and some people just want to be able to listen to it while they're walking their dog.
Yeah.
I'm a very like listen to podcasts while I use a podcast to multitask. I have to be doing multiple things in order to be consuming
Okay.
something. Sitting down and
Yeah, I
consuming
do
it.
I do that when I drive. I'll listen to podcasts when I
Yeah.
drive long distances, and yeah. But yeah,
No,
some people just like listening to English accents from
yeah,
around the world.
this is true. This is true. It has to be kind of like the right tone. I think there was one audiobook
Mhm.
that I downloaded and I was like, oh, I'm very into this. Very English accent, but it was almost a little too soothing. Like the decibel level was a little too low and his
A little
rhythm
bit
was a
just
little like, I was like, well,
yeah,
I
a
could
little
use
too
this
posh.
to sleep. Yeah.
Sleep, yeah.
Well, it was a little too yeah, it was just very soothing to the point where I fell asleep. So I could never get through the book, which was a very sad part. But The reason I'm also so excited about talking to you, because now we're in the strategy part, is really
Mm.
it's because I think that video has become so incredibly prolific. And, before we dive too deep into just how you can leverage video for marketing, I'd love to get your take on what you think, like, why? Why is video so huge right now for storytelling?
Okay. Um, Without going into too much thing, I think if you look at the reasons why video works, at the top level, you've got emotional storytelling. So and it's very much
Yeah.
on a device, a mobile device in our hands. So we've suddenly got a way of communicating on a very deep level with people very personally. So we can do storytelling with video like no other format. We can
Yeah.
tell strong emotional stories, but also I think we need to add into that the mere fact that there is something very satisfying about handling a phone. It gives us little dopamine rewards. We these devices are manufactured, so we keep going back to them. So we're picking them up all the time, and there's a reward for every time we pick them up. So when you're searching for something on YouTube and you find something, you get a little kick of dopamine because it rewards your search behavior. So I find they're almost semi-addictive devices, aren't they? Let's be honest. There's a
Yeah.
big discussion around, is it addictive or not? But merely that actually, because you get dopamine hits a lot, your brain tells you that as a source of things where you're going to find things rewarding. Also, it's moving image. So you've got these cells in your eyes called the ganglion cells, and they've evolved so that we don't get eaten by snakes. If there's a movement, you get attracted to it. So suddenly we've got
Yes.
these devices in our hands that attract our attention all the time. Which is why if your phone is face down on the other side of the room and the LinkedIn alert goes off or whatever alert it is, you have the little light comes on and you're instantly attracted to it. So, just moving image is really attractive. And then the main reason it's so attractive, powerful at the moment is targeting. We can target people by interest groups, age, demographics, likes.
Hmm.
We can start retargeting them based on what they go and browse. So, you know, the mobile phone is the most powerful tool for marketing we've ever had. And then video on it is probably the most powerful thing we've got. So it is now, it used to be video as part of marketing. And I think very much now it kind of is marketing because its
Yeah.
tendrils are in every part, right? Whether you're trying to
Yeah.
drive SEO on site or you're trying to get attention with paid ads, it's going to be moving image, right?
Yeah, I would agree. I also think it's easier to consume certain things in a video
Mm.
format as well too. But one of the
You
things that I
retain much more
wanted
information. Yeah.
exactly. One of the
Mm.
things that I wanted to double click on that you had said was the emotion part, because you've said this actually a few times, even
Mm.
just starting off. It's the emotion part that I think makes a really compelling
Hmm.
video effective, right? I
Yeah.
How do you hone in on the emotion part? Or maybe we can just break down like the emotion part. What do you mean by that? Like
Okay.
I hear like, am I going to cry? Like, what emotion are you talking about that we need to
Sure.
tap into from a video format for it to be successful?
Okay, so there's three sections to that. It's a really, really good question. It's like kind of what is an emotional thing? How
Yeah.
do we leverage it, and what does it do? So fundamentally, if we look at what happens when we have an emotional response, and you've chosen a kind of one there, being happy, being sad, being made to laugh. What
Yeah.
happens is that you release various neurochemicals. You're going to be releasing endorphins. You're going to be releasing dopamine. You're going to be releasing all sorts of sort of nice things that happen when you feel an emotion. And the reason is because we're emotional beings. That's how we bond with other people. We connect emotionally with them. So when you tell an emotional story, what happens is your blood chemistry changes. And there's been some amazing research done, which basically showed that the level of chemicals that are change in your bloodstream directly affect the amount of behavior change you would do. So they did a study where they showed a very emotional video about a child dying of cancer, and then immediately after they measured blood chemistry before and after, and they asked people if they would donate money to charity. And the people who had
Mm,
the biggest response in terms of dopamine and endorphins, they actually gave more money to charity. So what we can show is that we can change behavior by changing brain chemistry. So what happens is you show an emotional film, there is an emotional response, there is a neurochemical response, and that actually affects people's behavior, which is really fascinating because we can kind of basically push emotions to do things. But then also
yeah.
there's this whole kind of like system one, system two, which is there's a book in itself, but we have two different ways of thinking about of viewing the life. We have two sort of emotional responses, we have two ways that our brain thinks about the world. We have system one and system two. Your listeners have probably heard of this, but system one is the subconscious. It's our sort of lower brain, lizard brain. It's what helps us to react
Yeah.
very quickly to things. It's why we make snap decisions. It's also the kind of thing where we drive in autopilot. So if you're driving along, sometimes you drive along and you get where you're going, but you don't quite remember driving there. Do you know what I mean? You were kind of in autopilot. That's your system one
Yeah.
brain taking over because it doesn't use much glucose. And then we have system two, which is conscious decision making. This is like, I've got a mortgage. Where am I going to live? But actually, the hardest thing to change is system two because it's very logical and that kind of thing. If we can get system one to quickly make a decision, we'll go with that very quickly, which is why messaging is becoming quite emotive. Because if you talk to that
Yeah.
emotional connection, that system one brain, and you just decide you like it, then almost system two doesn't even get a look in. So this idea that we're talking to an emotionally driven system one brain is really massive in marketing. So the way we leverage that is we go, okay, who are we talking to? What is the thing that's going to capture their attention quickly? And it could be happy, could be sad. But actually, if we're talking like a B2B market, you're not always doing a big charity thing where you're saving the world, but people
Yeah.
suffer from FOMO. Like, I haven't got it. They worry they're going to lose their job. They're worried that everyone else is overtaking them. So those emotional drivers are the real reason that somebody will buy your product. So what we're looking to do when we make content is figure out what that emotional driver is. What's the thing that really people care about? And then you just mercilessly squeeze on that because that's where you're going to get the thing.
Just shove it down their throats.
Show it down this, but in a way they don't notice. But so whenever we make a film, we talk about three structures: emotion, fact, and action. So we need to make an emotional connection with somebody. Then we can drive them with some facts. We can tell them some stuff, and then we can drive an action. And that can be in the form of a campaign, or just in a brand film. So if you don't make that emotional connection first and you don't have a reason to purchase, there's nothing that this is going to do for me. You can say all the cool facts and features till you're blue in the face. No one's going to buy it. But if you convince somebody straight up front, you understand their lives and you get it and you're going to make their lives better, then you've done half the job already.
I couldn't agree with you more on this, not just because it's science and that's the way the brain works and dopamine and all of that stuff, but I'm also just such a big believer that, the brands that put themselves first, that don't put the consumer first in what they're doing from a marketing perspective really loses out. I've seen people get so hyper focused on like the right words to tell them about like themselves versus like speak to their pain points. Like you're expecting, I think, as a brand, if you're just focused on talking about yourself, not focused on like the consumer and what they're feeling and what their pain points are, then you're just asking them to sit there and watch you talk about you. And like, I feel like when you break it down in that way, you're like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. But now as a marketer, I'm like, okay, well, how can I do that if, I don't know. I sell fidget toys, right?
Sure. Yeah.
How can I create something that emotes anything out of freaking fidget toys? You know what I mean? How do you find
you're
that
lucky
level?
there with a fidget toy. So let's say you're marketing to parents. I mean, you're putting me on the spot now, but actually every parent wants their child to be happy, right? And if your child suffers from ADHD or they're on the spectrum in some way, which probably isn't politically correct, the right way to discuss it anymore. But there's a reason why this child is suffering. That fidget toy is going to make them feel better. And that as a parent makes me feel warm and fluffy. And I know I'm helping my kid, right?
True.
Here's a kid in distress. $9.99 for a fidget toy, and I can soothe that child. Like, that's a straight emotional straight line for me. Yes, you're selling the fidget toy and you can talk about how much it bends and everything, but it's like, look at what you're doing for that child's life. They'll be able to learn better. They'll be able to concentrate in school. They're going to have lower blood, all those kind of things. You're adding that. So that's an easy one to do an emotional connection on. I've got a really good example of one where they've worked really hard. It's a piece of financial software, right? And it does electronic invoicing. That is the dullest thing you could. Talia, I think it's called Talia, and they have a really dull piece of software, which is really exciting if you're into it. But you can submit invoices electronically. How am I going to make any kind of emotional connection? And they had a bit of fun with it, and they basically said, if you input, if you're working in office and you input invoices manually, you're going to get a stiff wrist and you get an RSI, right? If you get an RSI, you
Yeah.
have to take time off work. If you take time off work, the intern fills in. If the intern fills in, they do a better job than you do. If they do a better job than you do, they get a job, and then they get the job as your boss. And their idea was, don't let the intern become your boss. Use this electronic invoicing so you don't get RSI. And it's a fun little thing, but it acknowledges like the only reason you're going to use this is because you don't want to lose your job, right? And I think that's a really nice, funny, emotional connection. It's a really good film, actually.
That is a really good example. And I'm very impressed with how fast you came up with the fidget toy too.
I do it for a
and
living,
I wish I could say, it's almost like we planned it out, which we very much so didn't. And this happens to be my very own fidget toy because I'm pretty sure I'm undiagnosed ADHD because I go down every single rabbit hole. Something shiny. But
yeah, that's what happens if you work in marketing. I think it makes you into that.
I kind of does, because I feel like you have to always be aware of so many different things that are going on. And to me, I find inspiration in pretty much anything and everywhere. So like, that's kind of part of it as well too. So
I think going back to what you just asked about though, right? So I think as marketers, we're like, which is the new social channel? What's the new tech? Interactive video, personalized video. It's like we get distracted, but you keep bringing it back to, what is the emotional driver that my audience cares about? What am I really doing for them? I'm going to hammer that. So it doesn't matter what the new platform is. You just keep pushing that message on whichever platform it is. So rather than getting distracted by the tech or those kind of things, it's just telling that story. And that's what we always come back to. So we're working with, if marketers are thinking about how can I use this, we work with Bupa, who are a UK or global healthcare company. I don't know if they're in the States or not, but they're in South America, definitely. So, how do you just talk about private healthcare? Well, actually, by owning the conversation around well-being at work and wellness at work, looking after yourself, meditating, but also structurally making sure the company is looking after its people, suddenly we can run a marketing campaign around how to be better in your life, how to get a better life-work balance. And all of this emotional stuff is so relevant to us at the moment because of burnout, because of working from home. It's really important. And yet that is now owned by this, this private healthcare company. So it's not just going, if you sign up to us, you're going to get X, Y, Z. It's like, we care about this stuff. We care about you. We care about this topic. We're thought leaders. And suddenly you just open up the conversation in a totally different way.
I can definitely appreciate what it is that you're saying. And if I'm just, a fly on the wall and I'm listening to you, I'm like, okay, sold. I'm buying what you're selling. Emotions,
Cool.
emotions are important. I like that. But how do I actually even attempt to implement something like that in-house, right? Like, let's say I am working for, I don't want to say a boring company, but like, whichever brands
challenging company.
A challenging, right? Where like people are very much so like, no, we've got to push our narrative, right? How, like, what kind, is there an activity? What can I put in place? How do I find the emotion? I guess is more of what I'm trying to ask. How do I find the emotion as a marketer listening on the brand side, right? Like, how do I find that emotion so that I can implement that in my strategies?
Right one. Yeah, and there's also a danger you overdo it, right? We've all seen adverts which are like plinky plonky, tickly piano music, and it's all for there's every single race and there's disabilities, but there's everything in there, and it's a really generic film about struggle or something. You've no idea, and then it turns out to be for a supermarket or a mall or something. So it's like there is a danger that you could just squeeze emotion out of nothing, which isn't relevant. So it's about finding a driver, an emotional driver that isn't just generic. It's very much tied to what you do. You asked two things. How do I find out and how do I get it through the board? The getting it through the board is easy, but you just try it, right? You just sneak it in. You just do one campaign, because I think with video, we can sometimes think about 60-second brand films, but actually you're doing all sorts of other stuff, podcasts, webinars, mid-funnel, how-to videos. Yeah. And it's just a case of like, let's try a message at the beginning and let's see what the click-through rate is and the engagement rate. So if you let's say you're doing YouTube videos and you try an emotional connection, you try some kind of message, and everyone's dropping off after 4 seconds, then you know that is not landing. But if actually you've got an engagement rate which goes over 30 seconds, you're pushing into 40 seconds, that message is landing. So it's kind of a trial and error. But how
Yeah.
you actually get to that point is, what we normally do is get all the stakeholders in a room, we get a big thing of Post-its out, and we start going, right, why do people care about your product? And the first half dozen things will come out will be, we save money, or we
Yeah.
turn around the amount of processing time. It's like, and you stick them all on the wall, and then you go, does anybody actually care? Do you know what I mean? Does anybody actually care about those things? And you have a really honest conversation. Then you drill down and go, okay, all those things on the board, what do they actually do for the consumer? And it might be they can finish half an hour early and they can go and see their kid, right? They can do that. So
Yeah.
I can't remember again the brand, but there's a really good, I think it was some financial brand. It's like, you can use their app to monitor how this particular thing is doing. And in the advert, someone uses that time to go and see their kid in a ballet, and they get to support their child because they get away from work early. It's like,
Yeah.
just get it all up on the board. And then what we normally find is there's some that are like too risky. For example, if you're saying, well, we know you're a bit lazy and this makes your life easy, like that's never going to float, right? But there's a sweet spot of discussion in the room about 2 or 3 things that really might resonate, and then you just test them. It's all about
Okay.
testing.
I appreciate that you are saying bringing in all of the stakeholders, because I can't remember if we were talking
Well,
about
leave
this
out the
before we
argumentative
started.
ones.
Yeah. Exactly. But I mean, and I can't even remember if we were talking about it before we started recording or while we were recording, but it
Yeah.
really is kind of getting everybody aligned so that there's not this internal, like, I don't want to say argument because that sounds so negative, but for lack of a
Mm.
better word, an internal argument about what we should be saying about ourselves, right? When you lead
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
emotion, I think it's so key to get everybody on the same board and kind of aligned. And when you involve
Mm.
everybody, it really does help. I am kind of curious, we've talked about like the emotion part, and we've talked about like some really positive emotions. What are your thoughts, or do you have thoughts on this, on the negative emotions playing into campaigns?
Yeah,
Do
I
you know what I
mean,
mean?
I
Like
think,
anger?
yeah, I mean, there's anger, there's FOMO, there is fear, there is like, you can use those very effectively. We do a lot of charity marketing, and
Yeah.
charity comms, and there's always okay, let's take charity because it's a nice, easy, clear thing. Traditionally,
Okay.
you'd go, here's some video footage of a child dying of starvation. It's like, that's punchy, right? But you get that kind of
Yeah.
like, you can get fatigued by that. But actually, let's talk about how you can go for a run near to you and feel better, but also make money by running using an app or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
that's much more, it's about, everybody know it's shit, right? We know there's people starving. We don't need to necessarily hit that all the time. Here's what you can do
Yeah.
about it. So it's like, you
Yeah.
can use the fear, but it isn't necessarily as effective as going, there's actually something you can do. But the classic model is, you spend the first third setting up the problem and the last 2/3 setting up the solution. So I don't think there's anything wrong with negative emotions. I think anger is a really interesting one, right? But certainly
Yeah.
fear, distress, empathy, they all work. There's nothing wrong with, you know, if you don't use this product, you're just going to get worse or you're going to lose money. They're fine. You just need to get to the solution quickly.
Yeah, yeah, and I like the breakdown of setting up the problem in the first third and then solving it
Mm.
for the viewer, or the consumer in the last 2/3. Now, I am really
But there is a
curious though,
danger,
because
though. Sorry to cut. Go on. Go on.
please do.
I was just going to say, there is, video's massive, right? And we're kind of talking here
Yeah,
about like 30s and 60 brand spots where we're doing it. That's like, but that's only part of it. If you're doing a 15-second TikTok, it just needs to be funny, or like, there doesn't need to be any
yeah,
brand messages in there. So it's like, it's very easy to go down with video like a whole of like, right, we're doing a 30-second, 60-second brand spot, but there's like 2-hour podcasts. There's like all these different social medias. So it's like, if the image moves, it's video. I think what we've been particularly talking about is those kind of brandy top of funnel things.
yes.
But as you move through the funnel into like help content, you can have that, you can make reference to the emotional stuff that's in the big campaign, but really you're trying to crack on with answering the problem as soon as you can. That was
Yeah,
just a
absolutely.
little sort of note, really.
It's actually a really good segue because my question was going to be much more on like the length of it, because we have been talking about kind of setting up and sort of telling the story and making like that emotional connection. I am a big believer that storytelling is a part of any really good marketing campaign, regardless of length. But I am really curious, how do you create that 60-second video that's going to do all the things that you want it to do? Or maybe it's the advice is don't force that 60-second video to do all the things you want it to do. Like I've
Yeah.
just been in so many of these situations where people think like, oh my gosh, this 3-minute video is going to change the world for us. But it takes a lot to put a video together. It takes a lot
Mm.
to put a video together, in my opinion, coming from the content side of it. So I'm really kind of curious of your thoughts on like how do you go from like, maybe it's not how do you go from like a 3 to 7 minute to a 60-second and still
Mm.
being able to make both of them compelling. Like
Yeah. Okay.
is there a
There's
formula
a
for the
lot.
60
There's a lot
second
in
that's
there.
different?
Yeah. Okay. So, do you know what a spork is? Do you go
Of
camping?
course.
Do you go out and about? Right. So a
Yes.
spork is a spoon and a fork, right? And it's
Yeah.
a really, really, really bad spoon and it's a really bad fork. It's like it doesn't
Yeah.
do either of them very well. And the ones with little knives on the end, you can't even hold them very comfortably. It's like a spork is not a good tool. It's not a good spoon. It's not a good fork. It's not a good knife. It's like, and it's the same with video. If you try and make a 3 minute that's everything for all the various departments that works for sales and comms and internal HR and all the rest of it, it's going to be a disaster. So you my thing is one thing per video, right? There's one goal. This is what we're trying to do. And the way that you can placate all the stakeholders in the room is we'll try, and what we do is we'll go, okay, instead of a 4-minute film that's everything and it's got an intro and then all the different verticals that we do, we go, okay, we're going to do a 30-second brand spot, which is about who we are and why we care and we get you. And this is
Yeah.
that emotional thing. But then each
Yeah.
department's going to get a 60-second, which sits on their own landing page, which explains what they do. And it's like, and then everybody gets what they want, right? Because they could, all the stakeholders of the room just want their bit in the film. And we go, your bit isn't in this film, but you've got a whole thing over here
Yeah.
where you get to dig into what you do. So we do lots of films. And I think that's the difference. It's like, don't do one that does everything, get a plan that does everything. So you'll have at the top of the funnel, something hero, grab attention, then that's going to drive traffic to the next layer, which is like, okay, what do we actually do? Next layer, what do people say about us? Next layer, what's the breakdown? Deep dive into the detail. So we view it as a funnel with lots of different content answering each of the problems at each stage of the funnel, rather than we're going to make a 60-second promo and it's going to sort our lives out, because it isn't going to do that.
It's impossible. Well, and I think also, especially with people's attention spans being so short,
Yeah.
like it's got to be really freaking compelling for someone to be able to watch a length of a
Yeah.
video. It- and maybe compelling is too dramatic, but like,
Well,
I
I'm a
mean,
big,
if you can
yeah.
lose me easily in the first 60 seconds, if you don't quickly get to the point of what the next, 6 minutes of this video is going to be.
Yeah. And I think that this idea of attention spans is really interesting, because I think we can all binge a box set, right? We can all sit there for 10 hours and pay attention. It's
For
more
sure.
like we're competing for a finite amount of attention. And your biggest competition is not another brand. Your biggest competition is Netflix, or your biggest competition is, something that's coming out on the TV. It's like, we've only got 8 hours of screen time a day, right? And it's how do we get that? So, um, it's about how you steal the attention. But some of the most successful films we're doing at the moment are 9 minutes long. We're doing a documentary series about how healthcare is connected to the future of the planet and climate change. And the idea is, we can have the best healthcare in the world, but if we're on a planet that's burning, we're screwed, right? So it's like, we need to
Yeah.
sort the planet out so that we can sort our own health out. And we're doing amazingly well with those 9-minute films. But equally, we're also doing 6-second TikToks and 15-second TikToks. I've completely lost my train of thought. What I'm saying is, if it's a deep dive topic and you're at the right part of the funnel, people will do 6 minutes, because
Yes.
they're in learning mode. But if you're catching them on the bus as they're running to work and you just want to get a brand name, you're going to have them for 5 seconds. So it's not only where people are in the sales funnel, it's like where they are in their day. Are they getting on the bus? Are you talking to them quickly via social, or have they read an email and they're deep diving into who you are? So it's like understanding where you are. It's a very complicated world. I'm making it sound much more complicated than it is, but
No,
understand
but I
where they
actually
are
think
and when they're watching it.
I don't think that we honestly, as marketers, talk about this enough. That there are so many elements that go into it. I think essentially, like people, I mean, you see a ton of articles out there, right? Like videos, everything, video marketing's everything. You're not,
Mm.
you're not in the game unless you're doing video. Oh my gosh, you can almost get just fatigued thinking of all the things that you're not doing.
Yeah.
But it is,
Yeah.
I also think you have to be very strategic about it, to your point. Like, where are they in the funnel? Like, and
Mm.
the way to me, that marries with like even your paid strategy is then don't turn your ads on in the middle of the day. Like
Yeah.
if this piece is made to be consumed in an entertaining way, when are people consuming that kind of content? And to your point, where are they at when they are also consuming that content as
Mm.
well too? Like you have to be able to connect all of these dots to really be incredibly effective.
Yeah,
So
I think
I think
a lot of it
that's to me
also.
is a
Have you
fascinating
ever
thing.
read Binet and Field? They did a book called The Long and the Short of It. It was by the IPA and Internet
Mm.
Publishers Association, I think it was. So basically, they've done a bunch of research, and successful brands will be working 60% of their output on long-term brand building and 40% on response. So that's like 60% is like, this is who we are, this is what we stand for, but 40% is going to be direct response. So when you're looking at your marketing mix, you're thinking, where is this video going, right? Is this a brand piece, which is top of funnel? Or is it like for people who are literally in market, who are searching for the thing that I'm selling right now? And it's like, when you
Yeah.
understand if it's brand building or activation or response, it's like that really informs you. So we're working with an electric charging company at the moment, and they initially started with, we're going to do a brand campaign and it's going to be influencer driven and it's going to be all this kind of stuff. Turns out their tactical things is they need to make some money now. So what we're instead doing is paid ads for people who are literally in market searching for very specific key terms. So it's exactly what you just said. It's like, what are we trying to do here? Are we brand building, or are we just trying to make some money in the next 2 weeks? Because they're totally different things.
Those are totally different things. And I actually kind of like that you brought into the conversation influencers or mentioning of influencers, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that if you are a smaller brand and you do have influencers that you're working with, I think what we're talking about as far as like, the storytelling and like meeting people where they're at, leveraging influencers for that to be your video makers of that. Like, when can I use
Mm-hmm.
this for what? I think you can get
Yeah.
really, I don't want to say structured, but also you can get real strategic with how you're
Mm.
leveraging your influencers. Like, this is the message I'm trying to get across. I don't know what the best way to do it. You know your audience. How do you do that? I think like that's even an effective way to like
100%.
do
Yeah.
do more with less, right? Yeah,
Yes.
less
And
bandwidth on
I
your
think
plate.
also there's a thing, influencers are going to sort our lives out. It's like, it's in the mix, right? It's really good at certain things,
Yes,
amazingly
they're
good at
not
certain things,
everything.
but what influencer marketing does, from my humble opinion, is where we use it. It's like great for driving brand awareness and great for like answering specific things around like what your brand does in a sort of general way. And it
Absolutely.
can even be really useful if it's done right to drive traffic, but it's not going to convert traffic on your site. So it's like, but what you can do is you can use that same influencer and do some brand made content that sits on your site that answers more specific problems. So it's like, where are we in the funnel and how do we most effectively use it? But yeah, influencer stuff we're doing at the moment is smashing it. Ridiculous. We're getting some
Yeah.
crazy views, but you have to have that backed up with the rest of the plan of like, right, where am I sending them? What am I telling them?
Yeah, where are we sending them? What are we telling them? Are we hitting their emotions? There are a lot of things
Yeah.
that we kind of covered in the conversation. And before we do end this, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where do you think video marketing is going over like the next 5 years? Because I think it's already evolved so much from, especially with TikTok, right? Because
Mm.
everything's gotten like smaller, smaller, smaller. But then I also see this shift to like longer, 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 shorter videos, which that seems like an oxymoron, but like,
Yeah.
we go from
Yeah.
super short to like, okay, now let's expand on that. So I'm kind of curious, how do you see video marketing kind of evolving over the next 5 years?
I mean, I think it's going to continue doing what it's so like 10 years ago, we made one 16:9 film that went on a DVD and we posted it to you, right? That was how it got done. And then to that, we added a YouTube. So we would do a DVD and then a YouTube thing. And it's like
Yeah.
now we're adding 1.1s on Insta and 9.16s on TikTok, and we're adding like point of purchase, and we're adding all these kind of other things. So I think what's going to happen is it's just going to get more complicated. There's going to be more players. There's going to be like everyone saying long form is the thing and short form is the thing. And I think there is more of a sway. What's happening at the moment is there's a divergence. The short is getting shorter and the long is getting longer. So we are
Yeah.
not really making 2 or 3 minutes at the moment. We're making 15s, 25s, 30s, 59s, and then 7 minutes and 10 minutes. And that middle bit is gone. And I think that's good
Yes.
because that is like, are we deep dive? Am I understanding the product, or am I just getting some noise and being made to laugh and stuff? So I think that's going to happen. And I think personalization is going to be the big thing. So we haven't really touched on this, but
Mm.
the personalization technology now means that I can send one person a video that feeds back to them any data that I have about them, their name, their age, what they've bought, and they can get a video that's personal to them. So I can send, let's say I'm running we've done some work with sports, a
Yeah.
sports club, and you can say, hey James, thanks for coming to 15 games this season. You saw 32 goals. You've seen this and this and this, and it personalizes. It's like the Spotify Wrapped, right? At the end of the year, you can
Yeah.
send people very specific things. We're also working with pension companies to say, hello Sarah, your pension is now worth this much. You've invested this much, and you can take this much out when you retire. It's like very, very personalized content, and I think that's a massive way that it's going to go.
I feel like we could totally do a completely other podcast just on personalization in
Oh yeah,
general,
yeah. I
because
mean, yeah, absolutely,
I have
definitely.
such opinions about it, because I think so often people are like, personalization, sure, insert name here. I'm like, that's not really personalization, dude. Like, it's so
We
much
did
more than that.
we did a campaign, literally went live 2 weeks ago. 60% open rate, which is very, very good.
Yeah,
98% engagement rate, 98%. So
that's
98%
huge.
of people watched all of it. I mean, it's insane. So it's like,
That
because if you
is an
send someone a
insane
video, it's
percentage.
insane.
That
Yeah.
it is
Because
an
if you
insane
send someone
percentage.
video about themselves, because everyone's a bit narcissistic, right? We want to watch a video that's all about us. So it's like people watch it to the end.
Tell me more about this person. Talk about emotions.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good emotional driver, everyone's favorite topic.
Well, and it's funny because you said 98% engagement, which is really huge. But for our listeners, what is a quote unquote good engagement rate on like a video?
Okay. Let's start with how many people watch it. Let's say you've got a YouTube
Okay.
channel, and you open your YouTube channel and you're getting a click-through rate of 5 to 10%. You're doing well. Above 10%, you're smashing it. 2.4%, 2%, you're doing really badly. If you're getting click-through rates of those, you need to be looking at your thumbnails, you need to be looking at your meta tags, you need to be looking at your titles. Like, you're in trouble there. Because actually, if you think
Yeah.
about it, if you move the needle of click-through rate from 2.5% to 5%, you're doubling the amount of views you get. So every time you double the click-through rate, you double the amount of views you get. And it's like, well, actually, if I could double the amount of views I get just by changing the thumbnail and the title, I'm going to do that. Then engagement rate. If you're doing a TikTok or some shorts, then engagement rates of like 80%, I think, are good. If you're doing a long form on YouTube, then you really, let's say it's 8 minutes long, YouTube is going to start rewarding you if the total view time, average view time, is over like 4.5 minutes. So the reason that we're getting longer is because YouTube wants people to stay on YouTube and watch it for as long as possible. So if you do a
Yeah.
10-minute film, they would much rather half an audience watch 5 minutes of a 10-minute than a whole audience watches a 2-minute. If you think about the amount of time that people are on platform. So if you
Yeah.
have a longer film and you keep people for half of it, they push you up the algorithm, you get found more via search because you're keeping people on YouTube. So I can also do a whole podcast on this, but it's like
We've got so many multiple topics that are coming up. I didn't even plan on asking that question, but I also think it's so important for people who are listening, like, because I think we look at views and there are all of these thoughts and there are all these articles, but in reality, what is good? I'm also a
What
big
is
believer
good?
that you
Yeah.
kind of have to measure yourself against like your own goals as well, too. Like, let's say you're just starting off with video and you do get the 2%, right? Like with your next video, you've got to improve on that. To me, it's always like improve on what you did before. Like that's how you know that like your message is hitting and all of that stuff. So yes, I mean, I think that like you can compare you can compare your metrics with, the standard quote unquote, but also like you have to
Mm.
always be improving on whatever it is that you sought out to do because you're the one that's pulling the levers and turning the knobs. So
Yeah. I mean,
I
absolutely. If
we
you're top of funnel, if you're sorry, very, very quickly, if you're top of funnel, your metrics should be views and engagement rate. And if you're bottom of
yeah,
funnel, it should be cold, hard clicks. You don't
yeah,
care if only 10 people watch it as long as 10 people click it. Whereas at the top of the funnel, you want millions of views or hundreds of thousands of views. And you don't really care
true.
if they click because you're different things. So
Yeah.
it's figuring out what you're trying to do and base your metrics on that.
I could talk to you for so much more time. I do have one final question, and this one's like the fun question. Here we go, because you've given me so much time. But I'd love to know, if you knew then what you know now, what's the marketing advice that you give to yourself?
Take a break. Like, I give yourself a break. It's like there's two sensible answers. Number one is be prepared to fail sooner and iterate faster. Like
Love
test it,
that.
fail, move on. Test, fail, move on. That's my number one advice. It's like really get your measurements right, test if it's working, and then ditch it and go, yeah, that didn't work and do something else. So that's kind of my marketing thing. The other one, I think the real advice is like if I was talking to my 20-year-old self, it's like take a break, take those screen breaks. You don't burn out. Because I think in marketing, there's always something you haven't done. There's always a blog you haven't written. There's always a strategy you haven't written. And you
So
need
true.
to step away and go for a walk so that you can come back and focus on the right thing. And that's my life advice.
I both really great pieces of advice. I won't get them tattooed, but I will write them on my
No. Well,
whiteboard.
they're
I
quite long
think
answers to get tattooed, you know?
and they would be very, very long,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
my arm, on my thighs, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here and bestowing your words of wisdom at the end, but also sharing your insights throughout our conversation. Thank you so
Been a
much.
pleasure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
In a world of short videos, long form content, or really anything that's like moving pictures, I think it's imperative for marketers to stay on top of video. Latest, greatest, how to tell a story behind it. It can't just be all about getting all the sexy things together. We can't all be Spielberg. Am I right? I was able to put together some key takeaways for you so that you walk away with some nuggets here. So here's my first one. First key takeaway for video marketing is emotion is a powerful tool. Building emotional connections with your audience through storytelling is essential for effective marketing. Find the right emotional driver that is relevant to your brand and audience and test its impact through various channels to really gauge the engagement. You've got to be able to test it out. It's not enough to have a theory. You have to put it to the test, take a look at the data, and that will tell you whether it's working or not. Second key takeaway, tailor video content to different funnel stages. This, I feel like, seems very obvious, but I think it's worth stating because we talked about it, but also it's a great key takeaway. Understand where your audience is in their buyer's journey and create video content accordingly. Short, attention grabbing videos work well for the top of funnel awareness, while longer, informative content suits those deeper in the consideration stage. And even honestly, on the other side of the funnel, once they become customers. Help them learn the tool or learn a little bit more about your product. Video is a great way to do that. And the last key takeaway, embrace personalization. Leverage personalization technology to really create those tailored video experiences for your audience. Personalized videos can significantly enhance engagement by making your audience feel seen and understood. Remember, combining emotional storytelling, funnel specific content, and personalized experiences will give your video marketing strategy a competitive edge and resonate with your target audience. That's what you want. Slide into my DMs and share what your key takeaways were from today's episode. Subscribe and follow on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. A special shout out to the amazing podcast producers at Content Allies. Check out the episode page to learn a little bit more about Jon or how you can get in touch with me. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Until next time, may the conversation flow, the laughter linger, and the outlook remain optimistic but grounded in reality. This is Katya signing off.